Good evening, everybody. Welcome all of you once again in the Focus Weekly Ethics session. We'll take up newspaper article from last few days and discuss them from the perspective of ethics paper. This is the first article that we are going to discuss for today. MLAs seek a roadmap for peace, justice in Manipur. These two are very important topics. These are the ultimate aim of all the ethical principles, all philosophies, all public administration theories, all sociology, all anthropology. The ultimate end of all the knowledge is to establish peace in the world. And according to Aristotle, it is in justice that the ordering of peace is centered. There's a very famous quote of Martin Luther King Jr. that peace is not mere absence of violence, it is presence of justice. So peace, or to say order, in society comes by justice. So the headline has really captured the essence of ethics here, putting peace and justice together. Justice is giving people their due. This is a short, sweet definition that we have been taking up since the beginning. According to Aristotle, justice is giving others their due. Now, this is a very open-ended definition, and you can consider various things under this box. What is due to people? But only when we give due, that could be natural rights, that could be resource distribution, that could be the sense of justice, that could be affirmative action, that could be right to life, that could be implementation of fundamental rights, that could be sharing of power, that could be anything in different context. But when you give people their due, whatever is legitimately, constitutionally due to them, once as a state you provide them, only then people are ready to have an organized existence, ready to follow the rules and the principles, fulfill their fundamental duties, give up the confrontation, give up competition, and embrace consensus, forgiveness, cohesion, tolerance, empathy, and that would result in peace. So it's a long roadmap, as Socrates used to call. It's a long road to ethics. It's a long road from this box, justice, to this box, peace. But peace is rooted in justice. So the headline of the news article kind of answered the question, how to seek peace. To seek peace, you have to come up with justice. But I'm going to discuss this article very elaborately and discuss those models of justice and development that possibly can be employed in Manipur post the violence, the disturbance, the disarray that the state is in. Moving from here, what should be done for long-term sustainable prosperity of Manipur? There are certain theories that I'll be using, and I'll be giving you some of the case studies and examples from India and the world. There are many theories of justice. One of the theory of justice that we have discussed elaborately in the previous discussions as well, that is theory of justice of John Rawls. And John Rawls has titled his idea as this, justice as fairness. And in this, he has talked about many ideas. He has talked about the idea of contract, that once you get into any kind of contract, agree with some of the rules with your co-citizens, not with the sovereign, then you have to imbibe by that. There are two principles that we have discussed earlier in John Rawls' idea of justice, justice as fairness. One is liberty principle. There should be maximum equal liberty. State has to guarantee equal liberty. For instance, fundamental right is equally guaranteed to all citizens. There is no discrimination in that regard. But additionally, there's a second principle after liberty principle, and that is called as a difference principle. I'm not going into the detail because I have done the detail in 2 times actually in the previous videos. So instead of discussing the same thing again and again, I'll be discussing a topic in detail that would be new that we haven't dealt with in the previous discussions. The difference principle says that society can actually have different tools for different stratas, but the rules can be different only in one condition. the difference in the rules or the inequality of the rules must ensure well-being of the least well-off. Meaning the idea of Gandhi, Sarvodaya through Antodaya, development of the last one. So you can bend the rules. For example, progressive taxation system, different sections are taxed differently. Everybody doesn't pay equal percentage of their income. Corporate tax theoretically is 30%, and some people are not taxed at all. So the thing is, that is a difference. Different people are treated differently by the state, but that is okay. That's an idea of justice. And when that happens, only then everybody would get their due. So the difference is allowed only in one condition. That difference is to improve the condition of the least well off. Otherwise, there should be equality of liberty. So we have to advocate for this in the society of Manipur so that the benefit reaches to all equally, or preferentially it reaches to the least advantageous section. That's a larger theory of justice. But as an immediate step, you have to take some extraordinary effort, as was taken by Nelson Mandela. We have in history a case study of South Africa. South Africa was quite a bit in the same kind of, if not more, disarray as Manipur is currently in. And there was a huge violation of rights of the blacks by the whites. They had the worst form of segregated human community in the history of humanity. The apartheid practice, the worst form of segregations of the blacks, different lines in the banks, different seats in the buses and trains. So that subjugation, that humiliation that the blacks faced, obviously they were in the mood to take it out on the white masters once they got independence. They had the black president, Nelson Mandela. So they were in the mood to take it out on the white masters, on their suppressors. But Nelson Mandela did not allow that to happen. He instituted a very famous commission called as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and started to work on reconciliation. If this does not happen, society cannot move forward. And any kind of contract which the justice theories are based on, that you will follow the rules. Why? For the sake of the fellow citizens, you'll follow the rules. So you'll follow any contract if you have the consideration of the fellow citizens. If you have the value of fraternity, only then you can have justice. See, there are 4 values mentioned in the preamble of the Constitution: justice, liberty, equality, and the 4th one is fraternity. And if there's no fraternity, you will not abide by the contract, any contract. You will not abide by your duties, fundamental duties, professional duties. You will not abide by your contract, your code of conduct, your duties, if you did not have consideration of others. And to have consideration of others, society, if has gone through a rough phase, must do something for reconciliation. Relationship building, if that does not happen, if the social capital, cohesion doesn't develop, fraternity, brotherhood doesn't develop, then there is no hope for the society. There is no hope for the society. In the idea of the social contract of Rousseau, this social cohesion and healthy communal life, the word communal means community-based life. If that is quintessential for any kind of contract. That is the idea in the social contract of John Rawls, of the idea of Immanuel Kant, the idea of Rousseau. All 3 are having the same kind of idea. The Rousseau influenced Kant and Kant influenced John Rawls. So that is something that is quintessential if the society has to move forward. As was done by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, the whites were asked to seek forgiveness, and the blacks were encouraged to grant forgiveness. And this creates that magical power in the society. You come to the starting of the video game. You can restart, reboot your system, and start all over again afresh by this magical value of forgiveness. But you have to seek it. Those who have done the wrong, they have to come forward and seek for forgiveness. And those who have been wronged, they must grant forgiveness. That's how the relationship can move forward. The society cannot move forward by grudges and by enmity, by anger, by hatred. And this was done. This was done by Nelson Mandela very successfully. He learned from his master, Gandhi. And Gandhi had practiced this on a very small scale throughout India and, of course, in South Africa as well. So this kind of reconciliation he practiced throughout his life. He did that in Champaran, then in Kheda, then in Ahmedabad, and he had reconciliation among the communities during non-cooperation movement and civil disobedience movement. He did practice that. And without this reconciliation, Manipur has no hope as it moves forward. Then step by step, the state has to take many steps. We can talk about Kohlberg's model of different stages of moral development. And there is progression from obedience in his model to universal compliance with the principles. The principled piece comes initially from obedience. For example, to take a case, for example, in the Nagaland Peace Accord of 2015, after decades of insurgency in Nagaland, the Naga groups progressed from violent resistance to principled negotiations, showing a moral evolution gradually. And this kind of accord, some arrangement with the community based or the state based arrangement should happen in Manipur as well, which you take as a cornerstone to follow. And gradually, the inculcation of values will happen, and you will not just following the rules. You'll be taking a principled stand for yourself towards peace. Gradually, it's going to happen. So, some kind of arrangement, in some kind of brokered peace, some kind of laws, some kind of standards has to be set up. And from there, the character development by emulating the law can begin. In the Nodling's ethics of care model, we understand that peace building must be centered around relational ethics and responsiveness to victims' need rather than abstract justice principles. Of course, more than the abstract justice principles, more than the rules, more than the constitution, things should be working on ground as well. And on ground, if we have to see the relations in the community, that is very, very important that we have been discussing from the very first point, that for the contract, there has to be fraternity. For justice, there has to be fraternity. There has to be relationships among people. And for that, there are umpteen number of things that we have discussed. One is John Rawls' idea of theory of justice, Kant's third categorical imperative of aligning one's end with the end of others, or Rousseau's idea of moral community, or the preamble's idea of fraternity. That's very important. For example, if you take the case of Gulabi Gang in Uttar Pradesh, it's a woman-led movement, and that addresses a domestic violence issue through the community intervention, although we have laws against it, but the implementation of law will not be possible till there is a community-based response to the issue. Gondoria Khone's resistance, this was making news a few years back, you might remember. They were resisting the mining activity in the Niamgiri Hills. And the mining contract was given by the state, by the government, to a private company. And you will tell me in the comment section which company. But that changed in the Supreme Court, and that was cancelled by the Supreme Court. The Gondoria Khone resistance, they took the legal recourse, and also there was a social resistance against the mining activities. So the point here is that there has to be a social response. And for social response, there has to be social fabric. For social fabric, there must be reconciliation after the rough, violent activities in societies. Otherwise, you cannot move forward. And as gradually the state progresses from that stage of development of relationships, it should go towards human development, real expenditure on health, education, skill development, vocational trainings. That must happen, as Kerala has done in India, one of the state that has a very high HDI. When the development happens, the care has to be taken that the development also must be sustainable. Internationally, Costa Rica has been a brilliant example for sustainable development. Costa Rica's expenditure, they have done many, many things apart from the issue of sustainable development. They have reduced their expenditure on army as well for human development. And they also have prioritized renewable energy. They have prioritized eco-terrorism, e-governance projects, etc. It's a model in the world. All this is very, very small country, which is the model towards sustainable development, budgeting, smart budgeting towards the right projects. When the development happens, especially in a fragile area, both socially and ecologically, like Manipur or like Ladakh, the local ideas must be used for development rather than heavy machinery based manufacturing or primary activities like large scale mining. We must go for the idea of development like small is beautiful. Appropriate developments with respect to the local cultures that can also carry forward meaningful transition in society. Reconstruction can happen based upon the small techniques, historical knowledge that the area has. One of the example in this regard I can give you of Himalayan Environmental Trust Sustainable Development Initiative in Uttarakhand. They're employing appropriate technologies respecting local ecological knowledge and cultural values. This kind of development is inclusive, not non disruptive to the ecology, and sustainable. So Manipur has to find its niche areas. It has used the historical knowledge and the local skills to chalk out its own development strategy. And as it goes on towards the path of human development, there are certain ideas like the capability approach of Amartya Sen must also be taken into account. Development should not be seen as economic growth only. Amartya Sen said that that is just a means, and there's a difference between development and economic growth. Development he has seen as freedom. Freedom is the ability to make choice. In life, you should not have forced choices. If you don't have a choice for employment and you have to pick up a particular job, even if you do not like it, that's not freedom. Or if you like a job but you don't have the requisite skills to get into the job, but you fancy to have that job, but you simply can't be hired because you do not have the requisite skill sets, that is also not freedom. Freedom is to really choose the way of life that you value. That is freedom. So development is linked to freedom in Amartya Sen's idea, and freedom is linked to choices, substantive choices. If you're able to make substantive choices in life, then you are free. You can choose your graduation subjects, you can choose where you work, where you'll work, you can choose your profession, your place of stay, your place of employment. You can make real decisions in your life. You really have options in your hand, and you can choose one meaningful option from that. That is freedom. And if people have that, then that is development. That is the idea of Amartya Sen's capability approach. Now, to get there, you have to take baby steps in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of skill, vocational training, professional courses, technical courses. The list goes on. He has kept it really open ended as to what will be included in the capability approach. But we have some stellar examples, like the Kerala's Kudumba Shri program. This is a woman centered poverty eradication initiative. There have been many other uh, examples of self help group like Kudumba Shri that you might have done in your GS2 social justice section that really has used local resources and the power of people coming together where the whole becomes more than the sum of the parts. That power that Verghese Kurien used in developing of the cooperatives for the white revolution in India, that power that is important because that decides what people really can choose to do certain things. When they come together, they enhance their capability, and only then they are really free. Individually, you can't get the bank credit that easily, but in SHGs, you can. You can. Your choices really gets enhanced. When your choices get enhanced, then your freedom gets restored. Then development happens. There is a Brazil's Bolsa Familia program. This is a social welfare program that provides financial aid to poor families, but conditional on children's school attendance, their healthcare done by the family. So the state intervention and the preferential treatment is linked to the capability that the family is developing for the children overall. There could be other ideas of development, the freedom to choose, the freedom to participate in policy making, the freedom to participate in the lawmaking, the participatory democracy. That's also the part of the capability of Amartya Sen. So if a state has to develop in long run and has to develop sustainably, it must follow the points that we have been discussing. Coming to participatory development, the idea of Gandhian model. And Gandhi used to say that development should not be done through machines. It should not be mass production, but production by the masses. As we have talked about in the Kudumba Shri model of one of the SHG, there's another very successful model in India, Seva. Seva is self-employed women's association. And this is also a cooperative model for sustainable livelihood. What is very important as any state or country goes through a very rough time, a difficult time, is ethical leadership. This is very, very important. In the Platonic idea of theory of state or theory of justice, there's a very important role of philosopher king. And according to him, if philosopher king is at the helm of affair, only then there will be harmony in the state. The leader is very important. There's a very famous quotation of John C. Maxwell. No nation can rise above the level of competence of its leaders. If the leaders are not competent, then the nation cannot progress. They cannot remain stable. If you have done your world history, you would know about Louis XVI and what happened during the time of Louis XVI. Things were falling apart, and he was such an incompetent leader. France fell apart, broken down socially, economically, because of incompetent leader. So it's very important that the leaders are very, very competent and they are ethical. Politics without principle is a sin, according to Gandhi. There are 7 sins of Gandhi that you must be familiar with. If not, you familiarize yourself. Very important. UPSC has asked it once, and those are 7 sins that can be used on 7 different occasions. Politics without principle is a sin, according to Gandhi. In the recent time, I can give you an example of ethical leadership from New Zealand. The Prime Minister there, Jacinda Ardern, she showed extraordinary leadership. The care, the common touch, empathy during the country's struggle during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, at the time of the Churchgate shootings, there was riots happening in the country. The country was at the verge, at the brink of breaking down. And there were fear among the minorities in the country. And at that time as well, she showed extraordinary leadership to bring the people together and remove that hatred and enmity from each other. If the leader does not actively do that, then by nature, the country is going to fall apart because of diversity. Unity in diversity will not happen by itself. Immanuel Kant has said that the state of peace is not the state of nature. The state of nature is state of war. You have to establish peace. You have to actively establish peace. And that is to be done by the leaders of the country. They have to set the examples. And when the shooting happened and there was anger in the country against some community, she wore the attire of that community. The head of the state is wearing the attire, and you can't be hating that attire. The head of the state is bringing people together and leaders on the common platform and leading that dialogue, that negotiation, as Gandhi used to lead. That will help in reconciliation, developing good relations, brotherhood and fraternity, which is a cushion that protects justice, which is a protector, the framework that actually grants due to everyone. But the chief minister of Manipur has resigned. His moral authority has eroded. And in that case, it's very difficult for a country or a state to come out of the doldrums if there is no ethical leadership. The leaders have to show extraordinary skills in such times. And when the leader take effort, the community must follow. Ultimately, the idea of Ubuntu ethics. Ubuntu ethics is a set of principles from the African continent. And there's one very famous idea of the Ubuntu morality or Ubuntu ethics. I am because we are. This is basically translated in line with Descartes' quote, I think, therefore I am. And there have been various versions of that Descartes quote. But this quote is very popular, very, very popular. I am because we are. This is the spirit of togetherness. This is the spirit of Vasudev Kutumbakam. This is the spirit of universal brotherhood, fraternity. Rwanda's quote after the genocide, they were emphasizing on this idea that even when genocide happens in the country has to move on. And to move on, you have to develop relations. To develop relations, there must be reconciliation. Without this, it is not possible. And for reconciliation, you have to realize that we can only live in a peaceful manner, and the country can progress only and only in one condition: if there is togetherness. This is that spirit. And without this spirit, you cannot be moving forward. So as much the ethical leader, the philosopher king of Plato, has to take effort, the community must also imbibe this idea of togetherness, of helping others, of idea of Bodhisattva Buddhism, the idea of dependent origination. This idea in Buddhism of interconnectedness or dependent origination. This idea of interconnectedness of everything, of suffering as well. This has been used in Ladakh to understand the issue of water disputes. This is one example where you can understand the issue of interconnectedness. If the water table recedes, that recedes in the entire area. So it's a really issue that concerns everyone. So if you're thinking that you will save the water in your well by not sharing with others, that's not a good idea, because when the water table recedes, then the water in your well will also recede. This idea of interconnectedness, I am because we are, we can survive only together. There was a quote that UPSC has given of Erik Erikson in the 2019 question paper, that life um, does not make any sense without interconnectedness. And this idea of society, this is the only hope. This is the only hope that there would be long term sustainable peace in society. So the Manipur has to follow those models. And now we have to move to the next article. There has been a tragedy that has happened in the railway station of Delhi. The count is still on, but I think the official data so far is of 18 lives. 18 lives have been lost. Many of them have been injured because of stampede at the station. There could be many causes of the stampede, but as we understand prima facie, there were some important causes. There were 2,600 additional tickets of unreserved seats that were sold. Now, this is not justifiable. This is not completely unacceptable. Just because the demand is so high, you will not sell these many seats. You can't be selling these many additional tickets just because people are coming to get it. There has to be some kind of accounting done as to how many seats you can sell if these many people will come on the same platform. And there were some wrong announcements also. There was confusion of a train that was coming on a different platform, but they announced it incorrectly. So the passengers of two trains came on the same platform. So the crowd became to unsustainable capacity, and the stampede happened. So here, let us first discuss the ethical issues that are involved in the case. Ethical issues I have taught you step by step to write in the initial classes. Now here I'll speed it up a little bit. There could be many dimensions through which you can write ethical issues. Ethical issue is one of the term that appears in the question paper again and again. Ethical issue, you just type ethical issues in the P by Q, you will see so many times they have asked ethical issues. Every year there are 6 case studies, and out of 6, at least in 2 to 3, directly they will ask you ethical issues in the case. They also ask ethical issues in section A. Ethical issues are those scenarios where a standard of ethics is either at risk of getting violated or has been violated. That is ethical issues. So it's not necessarily that something wrong has happened, but if you're risking the condition of someone, that is also an ethical issue. So ethical issue can be seen from the point of view of any normative ethics. Any normative ethics. There are different dimensions of normative ethics, like duty, rule of law, virtue, justice, utilitarianism, common good, consequentialism. There are 8 kind of normative ethics that I have discussed with you earlier. So if any one of the 8, or you can think from other perspective as well, any standard of ethics is at risk of getting violated or has been violated, that creates an ethical issue. From the consequentialist concern, if you look at the consequentialist concern from the point of view of consequences, there are many ethical issues. Death of 18 people, including children's children, that is against J.S. Mill's harm principle. Harm principle is that there are many ideas of this harm principle. One of the idea of harm principle is that you must be protected from harm from your co-citizens, and in that the state has to interfere. So you should not be harmed, actually. That's the principle, but popularly it's called as the harm principle. So you have the right to be protected from harm. This is a very fundamental idea from where many other ideas comes out. For example, in Canada, RTI is sourced from this harm principle. So since you must be protected from harm, you can be protecting yourself from harm only when information comes to you on time. So RTI in Canada is sourced from this principle, harm principle. The other way of putting this principle is an individual must be stopped by the state if he is going to harm the other citizens. But from the other side, we can read the harm principle as I have the right to be protected from harm, and the state must intervene if another citizen is about to harm me. But this was not done by the state. The state was busy selling the tickets, as many as they could. So there was no protection of the citizen from harm. The injuries that has happened, that's against maximization of pleasure or Bentham's utility calculus. Rather, the whole incident has maximized the pain, the psychological trauma of the survivors and families that has not been completely attended to. And that goes against Peter Singer's idea of the consideration of sufferings of people. From the idea of deontology, if you see that the duties have been violated, railway staff's duty of care that has been breached, if we talk of the Kantian's categorical imperative, there are 3 categorical imperatives, as you might know by now if you have been watching the videos regularly. I have discussed all 3 of them in the previous lectures. If the third categorical imperative is your duty to align your end with the end of others. So the railway must align its own end with the end of the passengers and not just look at the sales figures. That care somewhere was lost in the whole incident. Poor planning despite foreseeable risk. It is a time of Mahakumbh, and you do understand the traffic in the railways and other means of transportation. This is an extraordinary situation where the passengers demand are extremely high in this region, especially near UP. So it was your duty, according to W.D. Ross, who is also Kantian. There's idea of prima facie duty, and the prima facie duties which are visible to you from the given context. Those duties must be performed, but railway seems to be rather less prepared on this front. There were inadequate safety measures. On an important station like New Delhi, there must be a team, especially when there is a surge in the number of passengers. There must be an emergency team that you must deploy on important stations, especially and on those platforms, on the timing of those trains which are en route to Uttar Pradesh, especially because of Mahakumbh. Protection of natural rights, this idea of Thomas Aquinas, this was not taken care of. All these are kind of duties. It's the duty of the state to do these, but it was not done. If it was not done, it's a normative ethics. Performing your duty is a norm in ethics. It's a duty is a norm. It's a standard. And since it was not performed, that becomes ethical issues. Virtues. Lack of prudence. Prudence or wisdom is a virtue. And if you see that the tickets were sold in huge excess in numbers, that's against the wisdom. That's against prudence, or the Greek word for that is phronosis. Aristotle used to say that phronosis or wisdom is the highest virtue. It seemed to be missing. Nobody applied the mind. Supreme Court, one of the favorite line of Supreme Court is application of mind. The judges keep saying in the judgment, there was no application of mind in the High Court's judgment. Many times you'll spot Supreme Court statement, Supreme Court's judge's statement. Application of mind to think through and do things, wisdom or prudence or phronesis. These are virtues which that is not shown. Insufficient compassion for the pilgrim's safety, that is quite evident. If you look from justice concern, fairness, the idea of justice of roles, justice as fairness, there are two principles, liberty principle and difference principle. So far, some of the state government, like the chief minister of Bihar, has announced the compensation, but the compensation is inadequate for the victims. And the complete justice would happen when you really take care of their trauma as well, and when you really do reform. From the theories of justice, the difference principle of John Rawls that has been violated. There has been systemic negligence affecting the vulnerable pilgrims, and this kind of incident happens. Crowd management is a problem. Stampede has happened in the side of Mahakumbh previously as well. Stampede has been happening quite a while at many places in our country. Crowd management is an issue. Capability is not developed in the administration for this. And capability is also an idea of justice. I'm keeping this fairness and capability in the justice concerns. Or we can go with other dimensions of normative ethics, like one of the dimensions is also care. In the Nodding's model of the care of ethics, neglect of special need pilgrims. Elderlies, there were some differently able, many of the women and children, they have been the victim of stampede because they do not have the strength to fight it when the surge of people coming towards you. They all are special need pilgrims, and they are the victim here. Failure to anticipate crowd vulnerabilities. This relational ethics model, and that also has been violated. You can think of other issues, but these are some of the issues that I'm presenting to you. Now, what should be the response? That is the second part of your case studies. What should be the response when such scenarios happen? On an immediate level, there has to be some corrective justice, this idea of Aristotle. Corrective justice, in one way, corrective justice can happen is through compensation. But it goes much, much, much beyond the compensation. If suppose there has been abdication of duties, then the corrective justice of Aristotle will demand the punishment corresponding to the abdication of duty. There has been mismanagement. If it was defined in the code of conduct clearly for someone, which I doubt it was not, to have a tap on the number of number of ticket sale, it was, if it isn't, which perhaps is not, but definitely it is in the code of conduct of the station master to have good crowd management. Somebody has to take responsibility, and that for that reason you can also go for retributive justice or giving punishment, which is part of the corrective justice of Aristotle. And when that happens, that is complete justice. On immediate level, that is very, very important to win the trust of people, and not just compensation, although compensation is also important. Another thing you can do in immediate level is to transparently investigate and also report on the progress of the investigation. Fix the accountability. Accountability is very important for the central idea in governance, which is trust. If you do not fix accountability, if you do not do the reforms and the set responsibilities for future, then people's trust will be eroded. If there is no trust, you have no moral authority. Authority in democracy comes from trust of the people. And people trust you when you practice virtues. Virtues like transparency, accountability, probity, and in general, administrative character. So, after this, compensation and investigation and reporting on investigation and fixing responsibility based on investigation report, you have to move forward for long terms. You have to do systemic reforms, safety protocols, so that you always tend towards maximizing the pleasure and minimizing the pain, loss of life, injuries, etc. Infrastructure improvements. Infrastructure improvement is important, especially for specially need passengers, differently abled passengers, elderlies, women, children. Rawls difference principle must be applicable, and special treatment can be given for Antodaya, Sarvodaya through Antodaya to the least well off. The difference principle of John Rawls. For long-term ethical framework, human-centered design of stations. Capacity building for major events, the pragmatic ethics of John Dewey. You know the situation and you know the scenario, you know it's a time of Mahakam, but there is no preparation. So you are cut off from the ground reality and you're not working as in a responsive way. So capacity building or pragmatic ethics of John Dewey. Cultural shift towards a safety prioritization, especially on important public positions, places, and more so for Indian Railway. You have to improve the organizational ethics according to the Shen's model, focusing on safety of people in the organization. For the restoration of trust, there has to be, as I've explained you, trust from character. Character means the sum total of virtue. Accountability is one very important virtue in administration. Accountability is important in the Rousseau's model of social contract. Participation of people is very important. Social audit, as you understand, UPSC has also asked a question on social audit. Social audit has been picking up in our country. But for social audit, there has to be participation of people, and social audit has not become all encompassing, has not got into safety audits. For example, in railways, social audit is not done. Social audit is done for Manrega. It is for many of the PDS systems and other socially important programs. But for this accountability of the railways, participation of people in some form, their engagement must be enhanced. Then the trust will be restored that the railway has done its job and next time the event is not likely to occur. You must also proactively take preventive measures. Preventive measures like the risk audit, the safety audit, risk assessment, emergency response preparedness. Like Japan is a stellar example for their earthquake, tsunami. They do the preparedness, they do the drills. That they're also now using the virtual reality to simulate that situation and to develop the right kind of response among people as to what they will do when then for real the tsunami or the earthquake will hit. So this is what we can say from the perspective of ethics can be done in a situation like this. This tragedy, of course, highlights the problem, the tension between institutional efficiency and human dignity. Human dignity is the highest end that a person or a state can have. Protection of life of people, protection of the way they are treated, it's all part of human dignity. And institutional efficiency, in many ways, in giving quality service delivery, in delivering the justice, in many ways, is linked to human dignity. And if that is not done, then human dignity cannot be protected, justice cannot be delivered, compassion cannot be shown. And if this is not done, then you understand in the previous article we have discussed, it is in justice that the peace is centered around. Aristotle has said it is in justice that the ordering of society, that means the peace, is centered. And if this kind of incident keep on happening and changes doesn't happen, then there will be complete lack of trust in the administration. And when the trust is lost, then people stop listening. When people stop listening, then we come back from where we started this video. Contracts are broken by people. And contracts are broken when the chaos comes. Order comes from rules. Following the rules requires contract. The third article for today we are discussing now. This article we have discussed in the very first video in this series. This is the seventh one. In the first one, I have discussed this in great detail, the ethical issues around around the issue of the Supreme Court's decision of allowing to withdraw all the chemicals from the Union Carbide factory and in appropriately after treating it, then dump it and get rid of the whole incident and give a closure to the whole issue. But people in the Pritampur, the site where it has been decided that after treatment, the waste will be dumped, they are having anxiety. They're having anxiety that maybe their area will get polluted and then there will be long-term impact on them and their future generation. So the issues surrounding this, we have looked at it from the lens of ethics paper. Here, I am going to do something else. Taking this opportunity, let me read this case study to you from 2016, which is on quite the same line as the discussion that is happening concerning Union Carbide. I will read the case. You please pay attention. A fresh engineering graduate gets a job in a prestigious chemical industry. She likes the work. The salary is also good. However, after a few months, she accidentally discovers that a highly toxic waste is being secretly discharged into a river nearby. This is causing health problems to the villagers downstreams who depend on the river for their water needs. She is perturbed and mentions her concern to her colleagues who have been with the company for longer periods. They advise her to keep quiet as anyone who mentions the topic is summarily dismissed. She cannot risk losing her job as she is the sole breadwinner for her family and has to support her ailing parents and siblings. At first, she thinks that if her seniors are keeping quiet, why should she stick out her neck? But her conscience tricks her to do something to save the river and the people who depends on it. At heart, she feels that the advice of silence given by her friends is not correct, though she cannot give reason for it. She thinks you are a wise person and seeks your advice. She has come to you to seek your advice. The question now is, what arguments can you advance to show her that keeping quiet is not morally right? Although there's a risk, people who have tried this have been summarily dismissed without giving any reasons. They have been dismissed. She's a fresh engineering graduate. This is her first job, and she is dismissed. She won't have much of experience for this job. Difficult. So there's a lot of risk that she would be if she speaks up, and yet she must. So what could be the arguments put forward for this? There could be multiplicity of arguments that you can put forward for she to not keep quiet and speak up. I have some of the arguments here. You can pick and learn these arguments for scenario like this, because this is not just this case. There will be multiplicity of different cases that you will actually be seeing in the PYQs. And the year you will write the mains exam yourself, where you'll be a junior member and there will be a lot of pressure on you to just go with the flow. There would be something wrong going on in the organization, and there have been so many cases on just this idea. You are entry level, you're a junior member, the pressure from the seniors, something going on, you discover, but you have been asked to just let it go, just give your signature or be quiet. Then what will you do? So argument under your belt for once and for all. What will you do? What will you do depends upon if you have the real picture, if you can really see through what is happening. You don't have just facade of perception, but you have the real knowledge on it. According to Socrates, when you have knowledge, you move towards virtues. Knowledge is equal to virtue. Now she has to act. Acting is virtue. Habitual values are virtue. When you translate the value into action, that is virtue. But where does it come from? According to Socrates, it comes from knowledge. So you will start acting if you really gain the knowledge. And what is knowledge? Knowledge is information. Knowledge is interconnected information. When you know that the people downstreams are having health problems, What will be the ramification of this on company's reputation when things comes out in the news, media breakup? How would what will be the effect of the you're giving? How will it affect you? That affect the conscience of the people, the character, the morale, everything. When you really understand the connection of this with the other issues, that is knowledge. Knowledge has one very important characteristic of. So it's not just this. People must be aware that there are health. People must be aware that they are wrong. But do you also understand the ramification? Do you understand the interconnectedness of the issues? When you do, that becomes knowledge. When you have real understanding, then you cannot keep quiet. According to Socrates, you act. You will act. The first advice that you have to put forward is to knowledge. You can also advise the other idea of Socrates that good life is contented life. And the worry that she's having that she might lose the job is not the priority of an individual with integrity. Wealth without work is a sin, according to Gandhi. And according to Socrates, there's a very famous quotation of Socrates that secret to happiness, you see, does not lie in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. So chasing career goals, that should not be the idea. And that creates a paradox that's called as hedonistic paradox. The more you directly go towards the career goals, rather than developing, going on the right means through training and education and having the skill set and developing relationships, but you still directly focus on any goal, you will not reach there. That's a paradox. The more you chase, the less chance you have of achieving it. You can give arguments of Nisha's will to power to develop the capacity to be in control of your life. Do not get swayed away by pressure of the people around you. You can give ideas of Aristotelian's virtue ethics, that moral excellence comes about as a result of habit. If you want to become morally excellent, you have to take baby steps, and this is your baby step right in front of you. If you look at the life of Gandhi, from the incident of his not cheating in the spelling test at school, he took many tests actually later on and did experiment with truth. And finally, he was able to be on the right side when the question was to whether to call or not call off non-cooperation movement. He was having the courage to do it because he has been doing this, that to side by the side of the truth from the very beginning. So you have to develop habit of doing things and you have to start doing smaller things. And comparatively, this is much smaller. As she grows up into the management and decision making comes in her hand, she will have greater dilemma. So she must start here. And you can give plethora of arguments. Courage is a value that is said is developed by going through it. Initially, nobody is that courageous. And if you don't go through it, despite whether you have it or not, courage will not develop. So there are many arguments that you can put forward. And the second part of the question was, what course of action would you advise her to adopt and why? See, course of actions are these. First of all, you have to explain to the management and people around you that what wrong is happening. Maybe they know, they have the information on, in a general sense, we can say they know it. They know it does, that does not mean okay, they really understand it, thoroughly understand it. They have right understanding that leads to knowledge. So if you reveal it to them through case studies, through persuasive reports, some historical events, what happens to a company when it loses trust? What happens to a company when it comes, it's known that they're violating the laws, the environmental regulations? What legal, social, economic, political ramification will come? They may not understand that fully. So first thing is that you have to let them know. Virtue ultimately, according to Socrates, comes from knowledge. So if they're not virtuous, perhaps they are not knowledgeable. For a person to be virtuous, he or she must first gain knowledge. You also have the value of loyalty where you're working. So you will always attempt reform from within. Always. You have responsibility for people around you, and the responsibility begins from home. So you have to start from there, then the places that you're working, and then the circle has to gradually become broader and broader. But since you're working there, it is your responsibility that you change the character, and that is why you will take the pain of giving them their knowledge. So you will be adopting persuasion rather than gaslighting it and going to the courts directly. You should attempt it from within. If there's a grievance redressal mechanism, you can work it out from within. If there was no such mechanism, find your partners, find people who also see at the issue eye to eye with you, who are who agree with you, your stand, form a coalition and develop that persuasive force and carry out the persuasion from within. If it doesn't work, then become a whistleblower. There are ways in which then the legal provisions through which you can become whistleblower. We also have Whistleblower Protection Act of 2014. We can become a whistleblower. If it doesn't work, even after whistleblowing on the issue, then there is only one thing that is left. You have to resign. Resign and do not sit at home. Resign and start people's movement. People's movement develop that moral coherence. You can take the help of civil societies, NGOs, medias, and now since you have resigned, you can go against your company as well and sue them. You can go to the courts, you can go to the regulators like NGT and work from outside. But you don't have to go on both the boat together. So if you have to go to the courts, you have to resign and then go. The understanding that we have, the ultimate power is in the hands of the people. And if the people come together, then the sovereign cannot resist the demand of the people that is legitimate and whose time has come. So, this should be your course of action. Gradually, you should start doing things. Most likely, at this stage, the stage of persuasion, the job would be done if you have good persuasion skill. But in case it does not, you don't have to stop and come all the way till here. The fourth article that we have here is this. You have been picking up news of the refugees landing up in Amritsar. US is sending military plane all over the world to different countries and sending back refugees, which US has, of course, the right to, and it must also do. If the refugees or the illegal migrants are there, then they must be removed because they are illegal. That's not the question. The question really is the sensitivity in the way, the high handedness, the hegemony with which they are doing it. And their action seems to be rather less sensitive on the issue. Let me read this question from 2021. Refugees should not be turned back to the country where they would face prosecution or human right violation. Examine the statement with reference to ethical dimensions being violated by the nation claiming to be democratic. Nations claiming to be democratic with open society. They are doing it. The question was on refugees, but the news that we have been reading in the newspaper for quite a while now, that is on illegal migrants. And technically, there's a difference. There's a difference. So US has all the right to send back the illegal migrants. But refugees that have been prosecuted in their country, they really have threat of their survival. And if they have come to seek refuge, according to the conventions, international convention, you cannot turn them back. You cannot. Morally, you cannot. And the high-handedness that is being shown in US and now it is picking up now in UK as well, which seems rather less sensitive. The answer to this question is there in the slide. What I'll do now is read this part of the poem of the Colossal. The title of the poem is The Colossal by Emma Lazarus. This poem is engraved in the Statue of Liberty that's there in the United States. This poem is engraved there. I'll read you this part of the poem. Keep ancient lands, your storied pomp. Cries she. Who is she? Who is she? You tell me in the comment section. Who is she here? Keep ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your hurdled masses, yearning to breathe free. The wrenched refuse of your teeming shore. Give it to me, all of them. That's what's the idea of the poem. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And you see the torch held in the hand, Statue of Unity, sorry, Statue of Liberty. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. It was really the American dream, and people went there because of it. That was really a golden door. People saw it as a land of prosperity. And as the United States has developed because it has attracted talent from all over the world. Talents have come to United States from all over the world. That's how the country has grown. But now the country seems to have forgotten the way it developed, the way it has grown, and the way it has developed technology using which it is dominating the world. This is a message that's there in the Statue of Liberty. This is the message with which the US has worked after its independence. And now things are changing. So, the answer to the question, the ethical issues are here. You can read from the PPT. I'm not going to discuss it because we have reached the time limit. So, I'm winding it up.